7. Explanation of the Discourse on Tissa Meteyyae. Thus, I will expound the explanation of the Discourse on Tissa Meteyyae. 814. In this manner, the Venerable Tissa Meteyyae spoke about the troubles and sufferings of those bound by sensual pleasures. Dear Sir, please explain to us. By hearing your teaching, we shall learn about seclusion. 1. Those bound by sensual pleasures refers to the nature of sensual pleasures, which is precisely that unrighteous nature, vulgar nature, ignoble nature, evil nature, something requiring water for cleansing after the act, secretive, and absorption involving a pair of male and female. What is the basis from which it is called the nature of sensual pleasures? It is the nature for both male and female who are stained with desire, tainted with lust, leaking afflictions, surrounded by delusions, and completely captivated in mind, thus making it the basis for calling it the nature of sensual pleasures. For instance, if the two engage in conflict, they are called those absorbed in sensual pleasures. If they engage in verbal disputes, they are called those absorbed in sensual pleasures. If they engage in discussion, they are called those absorbed in sensual pleasures. If they engage in debate, they are called those absorbed in sensual pleasures. If they engage in arguments, they are called those absorbed in sensual pleasures. If they engage in reasoning, they are called those absorbed in sensual pleasures. If they engage in conversation, they are called those absorbed in sensual pleasures. Just as in this way, for both male and female who are stained with desire, tainted with lust, leaking afflictions, surrounded by delusions, and completely captivated in mind, it becomes the basis for calling it the nature of sensual pleasures. Those bound by sensual pleasures refers to those bound to the nature of sensual pleasures, devoted ones, diligent ones, equally diligent ones, those who practice it, those who have much of it, those who respect it, those who approach it, those who incline towards it, those who lean towards it, those who believe in it, those who prioritize it. Thus, those bound by sensual pleasures. In this manner, the Venerable Tissa Meteyyae spoke means in this manner, indicates the connection of phrases, the conjunction of phrases, the perfection of phrases, the combination of letters, the cohesion of sentences, and also the sequence of phrases. This is what in this manner signifies. Venerable is a term of respect, a word of reverence, indicating respectful thoughts and devout thoughts. This is what venerable signifies. Tissa is the elder's name, his designation, appellation, common name, nickname, title, naming, language, pronunciation, speech. Meteyyae is the elder's surname, his designation, appellation, common name, nickname. Thus, in this manner, the Venerable Tissa Meteyyae spoke. The troubles and sufferings, dear sir, please explain to us means the troubles and sufferings, harm, distress, blows, misfortunes, calamities. Please explain, proclaim, elucidate, announce, establish, reveal, categorize, clarify, demonstrate. Dear sir is a term of respect, reverence, indicating respectful thoughts and devout thoughts. Thus, the troubles and sufferings, dear sir, please explain to us. By hearing your teaching means your words, the use of your words, the exposition, instruction, the taught things. Hear, listen, grasp, closely retain, closely observe. Thus, by hearing your teaching, we shall learn about seclusion, means there are 3 kinds of seclusion. 1. Bodily seclusion. 2. Mental seclusion. 3. Seclusion of support. 1. What is bodily seclusion? Here, a monk lives in remote places such as forests, under trees, mountains, valleys, caves, graveyards, wildernesses, open fields, or haystacks, practicing physical seclusion. He goes alone, stands alone, sits alone, arranges his sleeping place alone, enters villages alone for alms, returns alone, sits quietly alone, meditating, establishes walking meditation, Vipassana, alone, walks alone, lives alone, behaves, maintains conduct, preserves himself, and sustains himself. This is bodily seclusion. 2. What is mental seclusion? When one enters the first jhana, the mind becomes secluded from the 5 hindrances. When one enters the second jhana, the mind becomes secluded from gross and subtle thought, vitakka vikara. When one enters the third jhana, the mind becomes secluded from joy, pity. When one enters the fourth jhana, the mind becomes secluded from pleasure and pain, sukha dukkha. When one enters the base of infinite space, the mind becomes secluded from form perception, hostile perception, and various perceptions. When one enters the base of infinite consciousness, the mind becomes secluded from the perception of infinite space. When one enters the base of nothingness, the mind becomes secluded from the perception of infinite consciousness. When one enters the base of neither perception nor non-perception, the mind becomes secluded from the perception of nothingness. A stream enterer becomes secluded from identity view, doubt, adherence to rites and rituals, latent tendencies of wrong views, latent tendencies of doubt, and other defilements at the same level. A once returner becomes secluded from the fetters of gross craving for sense objects, gross hostility, latent tendencies of gross craving, latent tendencies of gross hostility, and other defilements at the same level. A non-returner becomes secluded from the fetters of subtle craving for sense objects, subtle hostility, latent tendencies of subtle craving, latent tendencies of subtle hostility, and other defilements at the same level. An arahant becomes secluded from craving for the form realm, craving for the formless realm, conceit, restlessness, ignorance, latent tendencies of conceit, latent tendencies of craving for existence, latent tendencies of ignorance, and all external forms. This is mental seclusion. 3. What is the seclusion of support? Support can be explained as defilements, aggregates, and formations. The seclusion of support is explained as the deathless nibbana, namely the cessation of all formations, the abandonment of all supports, the extinction of craving, dispassion, cessation, nibbana. This is the seclusion of support. 1. Bodily seclusion belongs to those who have secluded bodies, delighting in detachment. 2. Mental seclusion belongs to those whose minds are completely purified, reaching the highest purification. 3. The seclusion of support belongs to those who have reached the stage of no longer forming kamma action. We shall learn about seclusion means that the elder originally learned to study but, in relation to the exposition of the Dhamma, proclaimed the teaching to others while saying, "We shall learn about seclusion." Thus, Elder Tissa Meteyyae said, "In this manner, the Venerable Tissa Meteyyae spoke about the troubles and sufferings of those bound by sensual pleasures. Dear sir, please explain to us. By hearing your teaching, we shall learn about seclusion." 815. In this manner, the Blessed One answered Meteyyae, "If one is bound by sensual pleasures, indeed, the teaching is forgotten, and he practices wrongly. There is this unholy stain within him." 2. If one is bound by sensual pleasures refers to the nature of sensual pleasures, which is precisely that unrighteous nature, vulgar nature, ignoble nature, evil nature, something requiring water for cleansing after the act, secretive, and absorption involving a pair of male and female. What is the basis from which it is called the nature of sensual pleasures? It is the nature for both male and female who are stained with desire, tainted with lust, leaking afflictions, surrounded by delusions, and completely captivated in mind, thus making it the basis for calling it the nature of sensual pleasures. For instance, if the two engage in conflict, they are called those absorbed in sensual pleasures. If they engage in verbal disputes, they are called those absorbed in sensual pleasures. If they engage in discussion, they are called those absorbed in sensual pleasures. If they engage in debate, they are called those absorbed in sensual pleasures. If they engage in arguments, they are called those absorbed in sensual pleasures. If they engage in reasoning, they are called those absorbed in sensual pleasures. If they engage in conversation, they are called those absorbed in sensual pleasures. Just as in this way, for both male and female who are stained with desire, tainted with lust, leaking afflictions, surrounded by delusions, and completely captivated in mind, it becomes the basis for calling it the nature of sensual pleasures. If one is bound by sensual pleasures means if one is bound to the nature of sensual pleasures, is devoted to it, diligently practices it, equally diligently practices it, makes it his practice, has much of it, respects it, approaches it, inclines towards it, leans towards it, believes in it, prioritizes it. Thus, if one is bound by sensual pleasures, Meteyyae means the Blessed One addresses the elder by his family name. Bhagava is a synonym for respect. Furthermore, one who has destroyed greed, bhaga, thus Bhagava. One who has destroyed anger, thus Bhagava. One who has destroyed delusion, thus Bhagava. One who has destroyed conceit, thus Bhagava. One who has destroyed wrong views, thus Bhagava. One who has destroyed thorns, craving, thus Bhagava. One who has destroyed defilements, thus Bhagava. One who has divided bhaji, the treasure of the Dhamma, categorized it, thoroughly categorized it, thus Bhagava. One who brings the ultimate end of existences, bhava, thus Bhagava. One who has cultivated the body, bhavita, morality, mind, wisdom, thus Bhagava. Or the Bhagava has few sounds, little noise, devoid of human presence, a resting place free from humans, suitable for quiet sitting, frequented remote forests and wildernesses, bhaji, thus Bhagava. Or the Bhagava shares, baggin robes, alms food, lodgings, and necessary medicines for illness, thus Bhagava. Or the Bhagava partakes of the taste of meaning, the taste of the Dhamma, the taste of liberation, excellent morality, excellent mind, meditation, excellent wisdom, thus Bhagava. Or the Bhagava possesses the four absorptions, jhanas, the four immeasurables, loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, equanimity, the four formless attainments, thus Bhagava. Or the Bhagava possesses the 8 liberations, the 8 victorious spheres, the 9 sequential attainments, thus Bhagava. Or the Bhagava practices the 10 recollections, attains the 10 pervasive meditations, possesses mindfulness of breathing anapanasati, as concentration, attains concentration on impurity, thus Bhagava. Or the Bhagava possesses the 4 establishments of mindfulness, the 4 right efforts, the 4 bases of supernormal power, the 5 faculties, the 5 powers, the 7 factors of enlightenment, the noble eightfold path, thus Bhagava. Or the Bhagava possesses the 10 powers of a Tathagata, the 4 fearlessnesses, the 4 analytical knowledges, Niruddhi Padasambhata, the 6 divine powers, Iddhivida, the 6 qualities of a Buddha. All bodily actions revolve according to the wisdom of the Buddha. All verbal actions revolve according to the wisdom of the Buddha. All mental actions revolve according to the wisdom of the Buddha. The wisdom of the Buddha is unbreakable in the past. The wisdom of the Buddha is unbreakable in the future. The wisdom of the Buddha is unbreakable in the present. Thus Bhagava. The name Bhagava was not created by the mother, nor by the father, nor by brothers, nor by sisters, nor by friends or colleagues, nor by relatives or kin, nor by monks or Brahmins, nor by gods. It is the ultimate concept of liberation, attained with the realization of omniscience at the root of the Bodhi tree by the fully enlightened Buddhas, namely the Bhagava. 785. 779. By fully knowing the mental formations, sana, cross over the flood of craving, become a sage muni, unstained by all attachments, pull out the arrow of craving, and walk without negligence. Such a one does not long for this world or the next. Explanation. By fully knowing the mental formations, sana, refers to comprehending formations through 3 kinds of full understanding. 1. Understanding as knowledge. 2. Understanding through reasoning. And 3. Understanding through abandonment. 1. What is understanding as knowledge? One knows the formations. This is the formation of desire. This is the formation of hatred. This is the formation of harming. This is the formation of renunciation. This is the formation of non-hatred. This is the formation of non-harming. This is the formation of form. This is the formation of sound. This is the formation of smell. This is the formation of taste. This is the formation of touch. This is the formation of mental objects. Thus, one knows and sees them as they truly are. This is understanding as knowledge. 2. What is understanding through reasoning? Having known these formations, one reflects on them from various perspectives. Impermanence, suffering, disease, abscess, arrow, distress, illness, alienation, decay, danger, fear, calamity, instability, destructibility, non-eternality, lack of refuge, lack of shelter, lack of reliance, emptiness, falsity, voidness, non-self, peril, changeability, essencelessness, root of suffering, killer, non-existence, defilement, conditioned phenomena, Mara's bait, birth, aging, sickness, death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, despair, corruption, origination, cessation, gratification, danger, and escape. Reflecting thus, one understands formations through reasoning. 3. What is understanding through abandonment? Reflecting thus, one abandons, removes, ceases, and brings to non-existence the craving and attachment toward formations. As the Blessed One said, "Monks, if there is craving and attachment toward formations, abandon it. Thus, those formations will be abandoned, uprooted, like a palm tree cut down, made non-existent, and will not arise in the future." This is understanding through abandonment. To cross over the flood of craving means to cross over, rise above, transcend, and overcome the floods of sensuality, existence, views, and ignorance. Become a sage, muni, unstained by all attachments refers to two kinds of attachments. 1. Attachment due to craving, and 2. Attachment due to views. Sage, muni, refers to one who possesses wisdom, which is explained as knowledge, discernment, judgment, investigation, truth discrimination, reflection, close observation, clear comprehension, sagacity, skillfulness, precision, clarity, speculation, close attention, insight, consideration, guidance, wisdom, the function of wisdom, the power of wisdom, the blade of wisdom, the high tower of wisdom, the light of wisdom, the radiance of wisdom, the lamp of wisdom, the treasure of wisdom, freedom from delusion, discrimination of truth, and right view. The qualities of a sage are threefold. 1. Physical muni qualities, 2. Verbal muni qualities, and 3. Mental muni qualities. 1. What are physical muni qualities? The abandonment of the 3 evil bodily actions, killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, is a physical muni quality. Practicing the 3 good bodily actions, non-killing, non-stealing, celibacy, is also a physical muni quality. Wisdom regarding physical phenomena, full understanding of the body, and mastery of the path with full understanding are physical muni qualities. Abandoning craving and attachment toward the body, and attaining the 4th jhana, meditative absorption, where bodily formations cease, are also physical muni qualities. 2. What are verbal muni qualities? The abandonment of the 4 evil verbal actions, false speech, divisive speech, harsh speech, idle chatter, is a verbal muni quality. Practicing the 4 good verbal actions, truthfulness, harmonious speech, gentle speech, meaningful speech, is also a verbal muni quality. Wisdom regarding verbal phenomena, full understanding of speech, and mastery of the path with full understanding are verbal muni qualities. Abandoning craving and attachment toward speech is also a verbal muni quality. Thus, the Blessed One said, by fully knowing the mental formations, sana, cross over the flood of craving, become a sage muni, unstained by all attachments, pull out the arrow of craving, and walk without negligence. Such a one does not long for this world or the next. Indeed, the teaching is also forgotten refers to forgetting the teaching through 2 causes. 1. The forgetting of the canonical teaching, and 2. The forgetting of the practical teaching. 1. What is the canonical teaching? It consists of what he has learned. Suttas, Gayas, Vaikaras, Gathas, Udanas, Itavutakas, Jatakas, Abhudadhammas, and Vidalas. This is the canonical teaching. This too is forgotten, equally forgotten, strongly forgotten, equally strongly forgotten, and becomes something entirely external. Thus it is said, indeed, the teaching is also forgotten. 2. What is the practical teaching? It includes the right path, the path that follows the truth, the path without opposition, the path in accordance with meaning, the path where Dhamma remains as Dhamma, achieving perfection in precepts, guarding the faculties, knowing moderation in food, being devoted to wakefulness, mindfulness, and clear comprehension, the 4 foundations of mindfulness, the 4 right efforts, the 4 bases of psychic power, the 5 faculties, the 5 powers, the 7 factors of enlightenment, and the Noble Eightfold Path. This is the practical teaching. This too is forgotten, equally forgotten, strongly forgotten, equally strongly forgotten, and becomes something entirely external. Thus it is said, indeed, the teaching is also forgotten. And he practices wrongly means he kills living beings, takes what is not given, breaks into houses, enters homes unlawfully, carries off plunder, plunders and robs, acts as a thief, stands by the roadside to rob travelers, goes to another's wife, commits adultery, and speaks falsely. Thus it is said, and he practices wrongly. In him who is bound by sexual intercourse, there is this unholy stain. Means within that person, there is this unholy characteristic, the characteristic of fools, the characteristic of confusion, the characteristic of ignorance, the characteristic of sophistry, namely this wrong path. Thus, it is said, in him who is bound by sexual intercourse, there is this unholy stain. Thus, the Blessed One said. In this way, the Blessed One responded, Meteyyae, if one is bound by sexual intercourse, indeed, the teaching is also forgotten, and he practices wrongly. In him who is bound by sexual intercourse, there is this unholy stain. 8:22. 8:16. In the past, he walked alone in the world. Thereafter, if he becomes accustomed to sexual intercourse, the wise call him, like a wandering vehicle in the world, an inferior common person. 3. In the past, he walked alone in the world refers to walking alone in the world in the past through two causes. 1. Being named as one who has gone forth, and 2. The meaning of abandoning the community. 1. How does being named as one who has gone forth mean? In the past, he walked alone in the world, having cut off all obstacles of household life, having cut off the obstacles of children and wife, having cut off the obstacles of relatives, friends and companions, having cut off the obstacles of accumulation, having shaved off hair and beard, wearing the yellow robes, going forth from home to homelessness, approaching a state of possessing nothing. He walks alone, dwells alone, behaves alone, practices alone, guards his conduct alone, maintains himself alone, and sustains himself alone. Thus, through being named as one who has gone forth, it is said, in the past, he walked alone in the world. 2. How does the meaning of abandoning the community mean? In the past, he walked alone in the world. While existing as one who has gone forth, he uses solitary forest dwellings and remote wilderness dwellings, places with few sounds, little noise, no human presence, devoid of people, suitable for meditation. He goes alone, stands alone, sits alone, prepares his resting place alone, enters the village alone for alms, returns alone, sits alone in a quiet place, meditating, establishes himself in walking meditation alone, walks alone, dwells alone, behaves alone, practices alone, guards his conduct alone, maintains himself alone, and sustains himself alone. Thus, through the meaning of abandoning the community, it is said, in the past, he walked alone in the world. If thereafter he becomes accustomed to sexual intercourse, refers to the characteristic of sexual intercourse, namely the characteristic of unrighteousness. See reference 511, which is called the characteristic of sexual intercourse because of its cause. If thereafter he becomes accustomed to sexual intercourse means that at another time, he abandons the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, rejects learning, backslides to inferiority, gives up his precepts and returns to lay life, becomes familiar with, habituates to, equally becomes familiar with, and indulges in the characteristic of sexual intercourse. Thus, it is said, if thereafter he becomes accustomed to sexual intercourse. The matter of him being like a wandering vehicle in the world. Vehicle refers to an elephant vehicle, a horse vehicle, a cattle vehicle, a goat vehicle, a sheep vehicle, a camel vehicle, or a donkey vehicle. A wandering vehicle that has not yet been tamed, trained, or instructed is one that veers off the path and goes astray. It crashes into tree stumps, collides with rocks, smashes the vehicle itself, crushes the rider, and falls into deep pits. For example, just as an untamed, untrained, and uninstructed wandering vehicle strays off the path, so too does the apostate, one who has left the holy life, resemble such a vehicle gathering wrong views, misdirected intentions, abbreviated, and misguided meditations. Just as an untamed, untrained, and uninstructed wandering vehicle crashes into tree stumps and rocks, so too does the apostate, resembling such a vehicle, increase wrongful bodily actions, wrongful verbal actions, wrongful mental actions, killing living beings, taking what is not given, engaging in misconduct driven by sensual desires, lying, divisive speech, harsh speech, idle chatter, covetousness, ill will, wrong views, various formations, conditioned phenomena, the 5 attributes of sensual desire, and the 5 hindrances to spiritual progress. Just as an untamed, untrained, and uninstructed wandering vehicle smashes the vehicle and crushes the rider, so too does the apostate, resembling such a vehicle, crush themselves in hell, in the wombs of animals, in the realm of hungry ghosts, in the human world, and in the heavenly realms. Just as an untamed, untrained, and uninstructed wandering vehicle falls into deep pits, so too does the apostate fall into the abyss of birth, old age, sickness, death, and the various sorrows, lamentations, pains, griefs, and tribulations. In the world refers to the evil worlds, the human world. Thus, the matter of him being like a wandering vehicle in the world. The wise call him an inferior common person. Common people, Puthajana. For what reason are they called common people? Broadly, Puthu, because they generate, janati, various defilements of the mind, they are called common people. Broadly, they are those who have not yet overcome the view of having a self. Thus they are common people. Broadly, they are those who watch the teacher's face. Thus they are common people. Broadly, they are those who have not yet emerged from all conditions. Thus they are common people. Broadly, they are those who engage in various activities. Thus they are common people. Broadly, they are carried away by various torrents. Thus they are common people. Broadly, they are scorched by various torments. Thus they are common people. Broadly, they are overwhelmed by various sufferings, lamentations, and griefs. Thus they are common people. Broadly, regarding the 5 attributes of sensual desire, they are stained by lust, filled with craving, bound, indulging, clinging, settling down, attaching, and obstructing. Thus they are common people. Broadly, they are covered, concealed, obscured, hidden, enveloped, and shrouded by the 5 hindrances. Thus they are common people. The wise call him an inferior common person, means that he is called a common person, inferior, lowly, base, wicked, petty, and insignificant. Spoken in this way, articulated in this way, uttered in this way, presented in this way, and used in this way. Thus, the wise call him an inferior common person. Thus, the Blessed One said, if in the past he walked alone in the world and thereafter became accustomed to sexual intercourse, the wise would say of him that he is like a wandering vehicle in the world, an inferior common person. 823. 817. His fame and renown, indeed his past glory, will also surely decline. Seeing this, he should learn to abandon sexual intercourse and practice seclusion. 4. His fame and renown, indeed his past glory, will also surely decline. What is fame? Here, some individuals in their previous state as monks were respected, esteemed, admired, offered alms, revered, and received abundant robes, alms food, lodgings, and medicines for their needs. This is fame. What is honor? Here, some individuals in their previous state as monks attained fame and honor, being regarded as wise, intelligent, thoughtful, learned, eloquent, and skillfully answering the wise. They were known as specialists in the scriptures, keepers of the discipline, teachers of the Dhamma, forest dwellers, alms gatherers, wearers of discarded rags, those possessing 3 robes, those walking evenly without discrimination, those abstaining from food after the prescribed time, those practicing constant sitting without lying down, those abiding wherever their seat is spread, attainers of the 1st jhana, attainers of the 2nd jhana, attainers of the 3rd jhana, attainers of the 4th jhana, attainers of the sphere of infinite space, attainers of the sphere of infinite consciousness, attainers of the sphere of nothingness, or attainers of the sphere of neither perception nor non-perception. This is honor. Thus, his fame and renown, indeed his past glory. The phrase his glory will indeed decline again means that if at another time he renounces the awakened one, the Dhamma, teaching, and the Sangha, rejects learning and backslides into inferiority, abandons his precepts and returns to lay life, then both his renown and honor will wither, completely deteriorate, perish, collapse, vanish, and be destroyed. Thus, it is said, his renown as well as his past glory will indeed decline again. Therefore, seeing this, one should learn to abandon sexual misconduct and embrace seclusion. Here, this thing refers to the state of being a monk in the past when there was renown and honor, and later renouncing the awakened one, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, rejecting learning and backsliding into inferiority, resulting in a lack of renown and honor, this attainment and decay. Seeing means observing, comparing, reasoning, clarifying, and making clear. Thus, seeing this, one should learn refers to the threefold training. 1. The noble training in virtue, 2. The noble training in mind, and 3. The noble training in wisdom. 1. What is the noble training in virtue? Here, a monk lives with virtue, governed by the disciplinary code Padamaka, dwelling with proper practice and conduct, seeing danger even in minor offenses, and undertaking the training in all its aspects. This includes the minor precepts, major precepts, discipline, foundational practices, initial actions, behavior, self-restraint, governance, and serves as the basis for entering various wholesome qualities. This is the noble training in virtue. 2. What is the noble training in mind? Here, a monk, having withdrawn from sensual pleasures and unwholesome states, enters and dwells in the first jhana, which is accompanied by thought and examination, born of seclusion, filled with joy and pleasure, abbreviated the second jhana, the third jhana, the fourth jhana. This is the noble training in mind. 3. What is the noble training in wisdom? Here, a monk possesses wisdom, the noble insight that rightly leads to the cessation of suffering, endowed with the knowledge of arising and passing away. He understands, this is suffering, according to reality. This is the origin of suffering, according to reality. This is the cessation of suffering, according to reality. This is the path leading to the cessation of suffering, according to reality. He also understands, these are the taints, according to reality. This is the origin of the taints, according to reality. This is the cessation of the taints, according to reality. This is the path leading to the cessation of the taints, according to reality. This is the noble training in wisdom. The nature of sexual misconduct is essentially an unrighteous quality, abbreviated, and is thus called the nature of sexual misconduct. Therefore, seeing this, one should learn to abandon sexual misconduct and embrace seclusion, means that for the abandonment, pacification, relinquishment, and tranquility of the nature of sexual misconduct, one should train in the noble virtue, noble mind, and noble wisdom. These three trainings, Trisika, morality, concentration, and wisdom, should be studied with focused attention, knowing clearly, seeing clearly, gazing intently, establishing mindfulness, having faith and conviction, arousing effort, maintaining awareness, concentrating the mind, understanding through wisdom, realizing what should be realized, comprehending what should be comprehended, abandoning what should be abandoned, practicing what should be practiced, and attaining what should be attained. Thus, therefore, seeing this, one should learn to abandon sexual misconduct and embrace seclusion. Thus, the Blessed One said, his renown as well as his past glory will indeed decline again. Therefore, seeing this, one should learn to abandon sexual misconduct and embrace seclusion. 824. 818. Defeated by various thoughts, he becomes bewildered like a poor man. Such a person, hearing others' bad rumors about himself, becomes astounded. 5. Defeated by various thoughts, he becomes bewildered like a poor man means that being overwhelmed and defeated by thoughts of desire, ill will, harmfulness, and wrong views, equipped and closed off, he becomes bewildered, strongly bewildered, reflective, and contemplative like a poor man, a fool, or a deluded person. For example, an owl perched on a branch targeting mice becomes bewildered, strongly bewildered, reflective, and contemplative. A jackal on the riverbank, targeting fish, becomes bewildered, strongly bewildered, reflective, and contemplative. A cat in gaps, drains, or garbage piles, targeting mice, becomes bewildered, strongly bewildered, reflective, and contemplative. A donkey cut off by flowing water, in gaps, drains, or garbage piles becomes bewildered, strongly bewildered, reflective, and contemplative. Just so, such a renunciant, overwhelmed and defeated by thoughts of desire, ill will, harmfulness, and wrong views, equipped and closed off, becomes bewildered, strongly bewildered, reflective, and contemplative like a poor man, a fool or a deluded person. Thus, defeated by various thoughts, he becomes bewildered like a poor man. Such a person, hearing others' bad rumors about himself, becomes astounded, means others such as masters, teachers, instructors, preceptors, peers, friends, companions, or fellow practitioners who reprimand him. Friend, you have acquired unbeneficial things. You obtained such an excellent teacher, were ordained in this wonderfully proclaimed Dhamma and Vinaya, gained such a noble community, yet due to indulging in inferior sexual misconduct, you renounced the awakened one, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, rejected learning and returned to inferiority. In all wholesome qualities, you lacked faith, shame, conscience, effort, mindfulness, and wisdom. Hearing their words, speech, instructions, teachings, and admonishments, he becomes astounded, condemned, beaten down, sickened, and disheartened. Such a person refers to such a type of person, established in that way, following that manner similar to that, namely, the renunciant, apostate. Thus, such a person, hearing others' bad rumors about himself, becomes astounded. Thus, the Blessed One said, defeated by various thoughts, he becomes bewildered like a poor man. Such a person, hearing others' bad rumors about himself, becomes astounded. 825. 819. Then, the person reproached by others' arguments creates many blades. This is indeed a great obstacle for him. He sinks into false speech. Thus, the person reproached by others' arguments creates many blades. Thus refers to the chain of phrases, the intersection of phrases, the perfect accomplishment of phrases, the connection of letters, the cohesion of sentences, and also the order of phrases. This is what thus means. Many blades refers to three kinds of blades. 1. The blade of the body. 2. The blade of speech. And 3. The blade of the mind. 1. The three types of evil bodily conduct, killing living beings, stealing, and sexual misconduct, are the blade of the body. 2. The four types of evil verbal conduct, false speech, malicious speech, harsh speech, and idle chatter, are the blade of speech. 3. The three types of evil mental conduct, covetousness, ill will, and wrong view, are the blade of the mind. The person reproached by others' arguments refers to being reproached by one's teacher, instructor, peers, friends, companions, or fellow practitioners. Such a person knowingly utters falsehoods, deliberately lies, saying, Venerable One, I was someone who delighted in and enjoyed the monastic life. My mother should be supported by me, but because of that, I have left the path, returned to lay life. Or they say, my father should be supported by me, my brothers, my sisters, my children, my daughters, my friends, my colleagues, my relatives. My kinfolk should be supported by me, and because of that I have left the path. They create, produce, generate, bring forth, and manifest the blade of speech. Thus, the person reproached by others' arguments creates many blades. This is indeed a great obstacle for him. This is, for him, a great obstacle, a vast forest, dense thickets, a difficult road, uneven terrain, winding paths, deep mud, a swamp, a great hindrance, and a binding constraint, namely, the deliberate act of knowingly speaking falsehoods. Thus, this is indeed a great obstacle for him. He sinks into false speech. False speech is called lying. Here, some individuals may go to an assembly, a gathering among relatives within a guild, or into a royal court, and when brought out as a witness and asked, now, honorable person, if you know it, speak it, they knowingly lie. Though they do not know, they say, I know. Though they know, they say, I do not know. Though they do not see, they say, I see. Though they see, they say, I do not see. In this way, whether due to themselves, others, or some material gain, they knowingly utter falsehoods. This is called false speech. Furthermore, there are three modes through which one may engage in false speech. 1. In the past, they thought, I will speak falsely. 2. While speaking, they think, I am speaking falsely. 3. After having spoken, they think, I have spoken falsely. Through these three modes, one engages in false speech. Additionally, there are four modes through which one may engage in false speech. 1. In the past, they thought, I will speak falsely. 2. While speaking, they think, I am speaking falsely. 3. After having spoken, they think, I have spoken falsely. 4. Speaking falsely contrary to their own views. Through these four modes, one engages in false speech. Furthermore, there are 5 modes, 6 modes, 7 modes, 8 modes through which one may engage in false speech. 1. In the past, they thought, I will speak falsely. 2. While speaking, they think, I am speaking falsely. 3. After having spoken, they think, I have spoken falsely. 4. Speaking falsely contrary to their own views. 5. Speaking falsely contrary to their own beliefs. 6. Speaking falsely contrary to their own desires. 7. Speaking falsely contrary to their own conceptions. 8. Speaking falsely contrary to their own state. Through these 8 modes, one engages in false speech. He sinks into false speech. He sinks, submerges, immerses, and enters into false speech. Thus, he sinks into false speech. Thus, the Blessed One said, thus, the person reproached by others' arguments creates many blades. This is indeed a great obstacle for him. He sinks into false speech. 826. 820. In the past, he was called wise, one who established solitary practice, and yet, if he becomes bound by sensual pleasures, he is dragged around like a fool. In the past, he was called wise. Here, some individuals, in their former state as monks, attained honor and renown, were considered wise, astute, thoughtful, learned, eloquent, and skillful in responding with wisdom. They existed in the world as specialists in the scriptures, keepers of the Vinaya, teachers of the Dhamma, abbreviated, or attainers of concentration in the neither perception nor non-perception realm. Known, recognized, and addressed in this way, they existed in the world. Thus, in the past, he was called wise, one who established solitary practice. Through 2 conditions, one establishes solitary practice. 1. By being named an ascetic. 2. By abandoning the meaning of a community. 1. How does one establish solitary practice? By being named an ascetic. Having cut off all obstacles of household life. Abbreviated. Thus, by being named an ascetic, one establishes solitary practice. 2. How does one establish solitary practice? By abandoning the meaning of a community. Existing as a monk, alone, in forested areas, wilderness regions, and remote dwelling places. Abbreviated. Thus, by abandoning the meaning of a community, one establishes solitary practice. And yet, if he becomes bound by sensual pleasures, the nature of sensual pleasures is precisely the nature of what is unrighteous, vulgar. Abbreviated. Because of this condition, it is called the nature of sensual pleasures. And yet, if he becomes bound by sensual pleasures, if at another time he renounces the awakened one, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, rejects learning, backslides into inferiority, and becomes bound, devoted, and fully committed to the nature of sensual pleasures. Thus, and yet, if he becomes bound by sensual pleasures, being dragged around like a fool means being dragged around like a poor person, like a fool, like an ignorant person, being dragged around and thoroughly defiled. One also kills living beings, takes what is not given, breaks into houses to invade them, carries off plunder, plunders and robs, acts as a thief, stands by the roadside to rob passers-by, goes to the wives of others, commits adultery, and speaks falsely. In this way, one is dragged around, and thoroughly defiled. The kings capture such a person and execute various kinds of corporal punishments. They beat with whips, with sticks, with clubs, cut off hands, feet, both hands and feet, ears, noses, both ears and noses. They impose tortures such as the acid porridge pot punishment, the shell stripping punishment, the Rahu's mouth punishment, the fire garland punishment, the hand lamp punishment, the driving punishment, the leather coat punishment, the antelope punishment, the hook meat punishment, the coin-shaped punishment, the lie punishment, the latch-turning punishment, the straw bed punishment, pour boiling oil, feed them to dogs, impale them alive on stakes, and sever their heads with swords. Thus they are dragged around, thoroughly dragged around, and thoroughly defiled. Furthermore, or rather, those conquered by the craving for desires, whose minds have been completely carried away, search everywhere for wealth, board ships to enter the great ocean, endure cold and heat, tormented by the contact of flies, mosquitoes, wind, heat, and snakes, dying from hunger and thirst, and journey to Tagumba, Takala, Takshashila, Kalamuka, Prabula, Visanga, Varipada, Java, Tamali, Vanga, Elapatana, Suvarnakuta, Suvarnabhumi, Tambapani, Supadaka, Balakacha, Surata, Bangaloka, Bangana, Saramatanga, Yona, Paramayona, Vinaka, Mullapada, Markantra crawl along goat paths, sheep paths, stake paths, umbrella paths, bamboo paths, bird paths, rat paths, cave paths, and walk with a staff. In this way they are dragged around, and thoroughly defiled. While searching and not finding, they experience pain and disappointment rooted in lack of gain. Thus they are dragged around, and thoroughly defiled. While searching and finding, they experience pain and disappointment rooted in the need to guard their wealth. How can my wealth not be taken away by kings, not stolen by thieves, not burned by fire, not swept away by water, not taken by unworthy heirs? While guarding and protecting thus, their wealth is destroyed. They experience pain and disappointment rooted in separation. Thus they are dragged around, and thoroughly defiled. Therefore, if he becomes bound by sexual indulgence, he will be dragged around like a fool. Thus the Blessed One said, in the past, he was called a wise man who established solitary practice, but if he becomes bound by sexual indulgence, he will be dragged around like a fool. 827. 821. The sage, knowing this danger regarding the past and future in this world, should resolutely practice solitude. Do not become accustomed to sexual indulgence. The sage, knowing this danger regarding the past and future in this world. This danger refers to having been a monk in the past, possessing fame, honor, and then renouncing the awakened one, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, rejecting learning, regressing to inferiority, then lacking fame and honor, this attainment and decline. Knowing means knowing, understanding, comparing, reasoning, discerning, making clear. Muni means silence, mauna, is wisdom. That is, wisdom, awareness, refer to 209. He transcends the net of attachment and is called a muni. In this world means within this view, this acceptance, belief, this inclination, desire, this scripture, this Dhamma, teaching, this Vinaya, this Dhamma and Vinaya, these sacred words, this holy life, this teacher's teaching, this self-state, this human world. Thus, the sage, knowing this danger regarding the past and future in this world, resolutely practicing solitude, means that there are two conditions under which one should resolutely practice solitude. 1. By being named an ascetic. 2. By abandoning the meaning of a community. 1. How does one resolutely practice solitude? By being named an ascetic. By cutting off all obstacles of household life, cutting off the obstacles of children and wife, cutting off the obstacles of relatives, cutting off the obstacles of friends and companions, cutting off the obstacles of accumulation, shaving off hair and beard, wearing the ochre robes, leaving home for homelessness, approaching a state of non-possession. One should walk alone, live alone, behave alone, uphold practices alone, guard actions alone, maintain oneself alone, and sustain oneself alone. Thus, by being named an ascetic, one resolutely practices solitude. 2. How does one resolutely practice solitude? By abandoning the meaning of a community. As an ascetic existing in this world, one should use remote forest dwellings and borderlands, quiet places suitable for meditation, with few sounds, little noise, no human presence, free from people, appropriate for sitting in silence. One should go alone, stand alone, sit alone, arrange a resting place alone, enter the village alone for alms, return alone, sit quietly alone, establish walking meditation alone, walk alone, live alone, act alone, uphold practices alone, guard actions alone, maintain oneself alone and sustain oneself alone. Thus, by abandoning the meaning of a community, one resolutely practices solitude. In this way, one should resolutely practice solitude, firmly establish it, and exist in this world as one who steadfastly upholds all good qualities and establishes them. Thus, resolutely practice solitude. Do not become accustomed to sexual indulgence. The nature of sexual indulgence is precisely unrighteousness, vulgarity. Refer to 511. It is called the nature of sexual indulgence because of this cause. One should not become accustomed to the nature of sexual indulgence, not habituate oneself to it, not equally become familiar with it, not partake of it, not perform it, not diligently practice it, and not uphold and carry out its practices. Thus, do not become accustomed to sexual indulgence. Thus, the Blessed One said, the sage, knowing this danger regarding the past and future in this world, should resolutely practice solitude. Do not become accustomed to sexual indulgence. 828. 822. One should learn seclusion. This is the highest for the noble ones. If one does not consider oneself supreme thereby, one is truly present in nirvana. To learn seclusion refers to three kinds of seclusion. 1. Bodily seclusion. 2. Mental seclusion. And 3. Seclusion from supports. 1. What is bodily seclusion? This is seclusion from supports. 1. And bodily seclusion belongs to those who are secluded in body, delighting in renunciation. 2. Mental seclusion belongs to those whose minds have become completely pure, having reached the highest purification. 3. And seclusion from supports belongs to those who have reached the cessation of forming actions, karma, without support. To learn refers to three kinds of learning. 1. The superior learning of discipline. 2. The superior learning of mind. And 3. The superior learning of wisdom. This is the superior learning of wisdom. To learn seclusion means that seclusion should be learned, practiced, diligently pursued, and maintained through conduct. Thus, one should learn seclusion. This is the highest for the noble ones, refers to the noble ones, who are also called the awakened ones and their disciples, and further called solitary Buddhas, Pratyabuddhas. For the noble ones, this is the supreme, excellent, distinguished, foremost, highest, and most superior practice, namely the practice of seclusion. Thus, this is the highest for the noble ones. If one does not consider oneself supreme thereby, means that through the practice of bodily seclusion, one should not become arrogant, prideful, conceited, obstinate, or stubborn. One should not generate conceit thereby, nor exist as someone whose mind has become stubborn, rigid, or puffed up with pride, like a conceited person. Thus, if one does not consider oneself supreme thereby, he is truly present in nirvana, means that he is present in nirvana, nearby, close, not far away, and in the vicinity. Thus, he is truly present in nirvana. Therefore, the Blessed One said, one should learn seclusion. This is the highest for the noble ones. If one does not consider oneself supreme thereby, one is truly present in nirvana. 829. 823. The sage who walks the world, having withdrawn from everything, free from longing for objects of desire, having crossed over the flood, those bound by objects of desire envy him. The sage who walks the world, having withdrawn from everything, refers to one who has withdrawn, separated, and secluded from everything. Having withdrawn, separated, and secluded from bodily misconduct, verbal misconduct, mental misconduct, greed, anger, delusion, wrath, resentment, deceit, cruelty, stinginess, infatuation, craftiness, obstinacy, fury, conceit, arrogance, heedlessness, all defilements of mind, all evil deeds, all distress, all suffering, all heat, all unwholesome actions. Muni, sage, means that silence, mauna, is wisdom. He has transcended the net of attachment and is called a muni. Walking the world refers to one who walks the world, dwells in the world, behaves, practices, maintains conduct, preserves oneself and sustains oneself. Thus, the sage who walks the world, having withdrawn from everything. Free from longing for objects of desire refers to objects of desire, which, broadly speaking, include two kinds: 1. Objects of material desire, and 2. Objects of mental defilements. 1. These are called objects of material desire. 2. These are called objects of mental defilements. Having fully understood objects of material desire and abandoned objects of mental defilements, having cast them off, removed them, brought them to cessation, and reached a state beyond conditions, being free from longing for objects of desire, detached from desires, having relinquished desires, spat them out, released them, abandoned them and renounced them, being free from greed for objects of desire, detached from greed, having relinquished greed, spat it out, released it, abandoned it, and renounced it, being free from greed, having reached nirvana with a mind cooled, abiding in bliss, and dwelling in the self that has become Brahma. Thus, free from longing for objects of desire. Those bound by objects of desire envy those who have crossed over the flood, refers to people, a synonym for sentient beings. People regarding objects of desire are stained by desire, full of craving, bound, indulging, clinging, attached, adhering, and obstructed. They envy those who have crossed over the flood of desire, the flood of existence, the flood of views, the flood of ignorance, all paths of formations, surpassing, rising above, transcending, equally transcending, overcoming, reaching the other shore, attaining the other shore, reaching the ultimate, attaining the ultimate, reaching the extreme, attaining the extreme, reaching the limit, attaining the limit, reaching perfection, attaining perfection, reaching refuge, attaining refuge, reaching fearlessness, attaining fearlessness, reaching deathlessness, attaining deathlessness, reaching immortality, attaining immortality, reaching nirvana, attaining nirvana. For example, those in debt long for freedom from debt, those in pain long for health, those bound by bonds long for liberation, slaves long for freedom, those on difficult paths long for a place of peace, safe haven. Precisely in this way, people regarding objects of desire are stained by desire, full of craving, bound, indulging, clinging, attached, adhering, and obstructed. They long for, cherish, yearn for, intensely desire, and thirst for those who have crossed over the flood of desire, the flood of existence. Reached nirvana, attained nirvana. Thus, those bound by objects of desire envy those who have crossed over the flood. Therefore, the Blessed One said, "The sage who walks the world, having withdrawn from everything, free from longing for objects of desire, having crossed over the flood, those bound by objects of desire envy him." This concludes the 7th explanation of the Discourse on Tissa Meteyyae.